You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Leap that started a few years ago when early hardware prototypes were emerging. We knew we had to push both in engineering and interactions and content. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but both developments inform each other. Our focus was to see how far we could push systems to create digital human representations. Mica is our prototype. Our benchmark for fidelity is an offline high-resolution representation. Lower-res versions attempt to achieve this level even when run in real time. Nearly 2 years ago, we had interesting progress in Mica's development. After focusing on realistic eye gaze, eye movement, and gaze, we set up Mica on our current prototype. AI components were then added to track the user and look them in the eye. Additional AI elements were added for body language and posture. Our team focused on natural facial expressions. We wanted Mica to emote in believable ways. Above all else, her facial movements are what connect you to her. The lesson here, Mica is an ideal interface to the human-centered AI that evokes natural reactions from us. The technical hurdles are to get the interactions and intelligence to a high level that people expect, but the guide and interface is unmistakable. Our focus becomes the attributes for Mica: her temperament, personality traits, mannerisms.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, this is Mike Balzer, All Things 3D, and this is 3D in Review for, ta-da, my birthday, 10/12/1959. Whoops, I guess I shouldn't give you that whole date there. No, it's 2018. Guess I'm going back a few years. But on that note, if you noticed, we just did a little clip from LeapCon, and even though I was kind of disappointed, I felt like it was a long infomercial, not a lot of baked demos. It seemed like it was a lot of speculation and possibilities on what the Leap Motion will do in the future. As you know, I'm not a big fan of it. I think they sucked in a lot of money from other developers, so it was somewhat of a disappointment, and clearly many of the developers did not get their units until they finally released it. But on that note, let me kind of jump directly to this article of somebody who wrote a fairly good piece on this AI assistant, Mica or Mica, I don't remember how he pronounced it. But essentially, if you saw some of the Unreal demos at GDC and then at SIGGRAPH, this type of, what do you want to call it, virtual character, it's very realistic, is nothing new. So it's a little bit, I guess, disingenuous that they're coming out first, but they seem to have attached AI and the ability to look at you. And it kind of made me laugh a little bit, because I've been doing head movement and eye movement with an application since 2015. But I did notice that the actual movement of the face and everything else was realistic. And the most important thing is, and again, they didn't actually show a real demo on stage. It was basically a video of some animation done previously, and it didn't actually show it being utilized to look at the character. So I'm just assuming that the person who wrote this article had an opportunity to see it within the Magic Leap. And as you know, the Magic Leap is not completely occluding the objects, so you have kind of like a ghost-like feature. And again, by not showing that, that would kind of take away a little bit of the realism in the character, so you'd be talking to a ghost. But the fact is that it could track you and interact, and as he mentioned, it didn't have a voice, and it didn't really know that he was there. So there wasn't any awareness other than some tracking. So obviously there's a lot of things to look for. But again, if you've been working in VR, some of these have already occurred. So the demos that they're showing here, I've seen several that kind of mimic that, maybe not to that realism, but there's no reason it cannot work that way. In fact, I would not be surprised if some people are generating some demos right now. So we'll see. But in the background, you may see another little extension on our Google Hangouts today. I have a special guest today because our main theme is about actually working inside VR or working in VR. And I'm going to be doing an interview next week with a company here in Portland called The Wild, who has a kind of an AEC type application that allows not only multiple people within a company to do things within the VR space. They also have an AR component that's being used on an iPad. And so we're going to be looking at different opportunities there. In fact, we're going to try and do the interview completely within the VR space. And that's going to be happening next Friday. It's going to be done in post, so I'll probably have it later Friday evening, so we won't be doing it in real time. So there'll be some examples. In fact, we're going to try and test it in a hotel. My wife and I, who also are married this month on October 31st, will be heading out to a hotel. So I will be utilizing something to kind of give a demo of what it would be like to use it in a hotel with a Samsung Odyssey. And so we'll see how all that works. But on that note, I'm going to kind of go back to a little bit later, so we won't take up much of our guest's time, but I'm going to let him introduce himself. But he is the director of, I'll let him discuss it, but if you notice, I've got the website behind us, Center for Emergency Solutions. So go ahead and unmute and please introduce yourself. Rick, there you go.
There you go. I just had that view.
So I tried to keep the name, but hi, Rick. We've had discussions before, and I'm glad that you could come on short notice. Rick and I have talked since we both met at the, I can't remember the name of it, but it was like a little expo done at the OMSI of some VR examples. And so we had talked. As you know, if you followed my show, I've done some examples of an active shooter awareness simulator, and that's how we kind of got together. Is that Rick has also been working on one, but he does a lot of safety awareness and education, and he has found VR to be a good opponent. So I'm not going to talk anymore. Rick, introduce yourself. Let me know where you're at, and obviously I've already identified the where your company is, but I'll let you take over.
Thanks, Michael. Happy birthday.
Thanks.
As Michael said, my name is Rick. So the first disclaimer is I'm not a VR professional. I'm actually a retired firefighter, training officer, and a battalion commander in a local department. And my opportunity is here at Concordia University. And what we do here is 2D simulation up until now, and specifically focused on safety training and emergency and incident management. I think what Michael and I have connected on is the value of virtual reality and immersive VR. I actually had an opportunity through Intel, who did the funding, to do a program in World Viz's program called Visible. I have it running behind me. It's an online meeting space, but more than that, I know you can't see the screen perfectly.
No, actually, I can see it pretty well. Now, of course, when this goes to 720p, because it's their live hangout, it may not be as sharp, but I see it very clearly, Rick.
The World Viz website has a really good description of this, and basically, I know it's like some of the other, the Oculus rooms, the alt space. It does have that connection socially, but more importantly, it's designing VR by somebody who's not a VR professional to craft a lesson and present it online in a cooperative, collaborative way. So I think it's super valuable. We just built a program for active shooter, which we built a classroom. It's interactive. We go over response procedures, and then we actually experience an active shooter non-traumatically, but more of an experience. And you all know how that affects your brain as far as learning. And we roll that out nationally probably next month. But anybody that wants to see a preview is more than welcome to get a hold of me, and we can we can meet in VR and do the preview. But any specific questions or?
Well, Rick, you know, obviously I've been there a couple of times. Actually, I've been there once. But as you showed me of an example that I guess you also do some training or at least some education for police officers. Is that correct? Responding to a situation. And clearly, you know, the thing that I see the benefit of VR and actually providing immersive experiences is, as we talked about, to create, like, I'm going to go ahead and jump back to this screen here that you have on your website. But the fact to actually get a jet, let's see, does this flip back or is that just?
It rotates, yeah.
Okay, so let's see if we got something down here. Okay, we'll just stick with that. But the fact is to actually, in this case, go out and put out the flames of an aircraft. To do that in the real life would be very, very difficult and very expensive. And you also showed if you had a situation where there was a major accident, maybe a chemical spill on a highway, again, doing that realistically with live actors or people and cordoning off a freeway would be astronomical as far as cost. And obviously you would have to get a lot of approval through the city, county, maybe even the state to do something like that. So to be able to do that in this type of environment, I think is extremely beneficial. And obviously the cost would be a lot lower and still provide a lot of the realism that you would have in a system like this. So something else that you do that I think is unique, along with the VR, and I'm going to jump back to your screen, is you have a full console setup where people can actually, as though they were sitting in a, what do you want to call it, a reaction room or something. I'm sorry. Well,
command center, emergency center, yeah.
Right. So not only could you have somebody in VR or in a projected image environment, but you also have people who normally sit at a console who have a realistic setting to respond. So you can have a full team. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think the value of all these simulation systems, and that's my opportunity here, is I'm not married to one system. And that's what's kind of really nice about being here, is I can blend all the technologies together. And I think what you're talking about is, I call it the ultimate tabletop exercise. Instead of a whiteboard talking about it, we have virtual simulations. They're 2D, but we all share those. They could be like a massive online game, but we have that face-to-face connection, person to person, and that's super important. Like if I saw you on the scene of an emergency and we've trained together here, I have a level of confidence and relationship with you that makes it go so much smoother in a high stress situation. I think that's the magic of having the 2D simulation in a theater like we have. But then if you blend it with some immersive content, it just it takes it to another level. So.
Yeah, and obviously you didn't get a chance to really, or I wasn't there when you were actually doing something live, but I could imagine from my own experience being in the Air Force of having full mock-ups of the satellite communication system that are the maintenance people as well as the operators could train on before actually going on the aircraft if this thing resided or on the ground stations.
Yeah.
But it was basically, for the most part, a full replica of the environment, and we could do loopbacks, and actually we had another system in another room so we could do the full mock-up. So I see the huge benefit. But from a VR perspective, what are the strengths that you see happening with VR that you're not going to be able to do, let's say, in this full console or mock-up type environment?
Well, Michael, I think you hit the key point, is doing high-risk, low-frequency, dangerous training. And you're correct. You can replicate many of those things in real life, but they're very expensive and they also have real risk. We've had people die in training. So those are the type of things we replicate. The company that has the law enforcement program I use called Nsena, N-S-E-N-A, they have a wonderful interface to user experience. It does just that with law enforcement. So you'll have encounters with, let's say, a bridge jumper, and somebody wants to commit suicide. They have to talk the person down, And as a presenter, you can control the responses of the avatar while they're in 3D in VR. It's a very flexible system. I used it down at the police academy here in Oregon and had a really, really good response by the recruits. And then also, of course, you can do the high-risk training of being use of deadly force, which the media has their presentation of it. And so a quick story. I had FBI Academy alumni in here, so they're citizens and business people that are trying to be supportive of law enforcement. I had them in the simulator, and his response was, he took off the headset like most people do, and they kind of like do the oh wow. And he said, I never knew what a police officer felt like. And because of the immersiveness and the ability to watch threats in a 360 environment was very disturbing to him. So it really echoed what an officer feels. So I thought that alone is the power of it. And of course, the empathy training with a reverse sense of presence is another thing that I think is going to be amazing for law enforcement. But you hit it, the high risk is the main key right now.
Well, and another important thing is that not very many people really get an opportunity to be immersed in a, what would you call it, a sophisticated system. Some people may have tried Google Cardboard or maybe the Oculus Go, but having an actual HTC Vive or some of the Windows, the more expensive Windows media systems where you can actually move your controllers, it has a much more realistic feeling to it. And even though the cost is obviously more, it's not that much if you compare to what trying to create something in real reality per se. And also another point that we don't really touch on, and one of the things that's part of this theme, is the ability to bring people together from around the world to be in that same environment. As you talked about in the system behind you, by representing each individual with pseudo avatars, and they're working on ways to create facial gestures and eye movement, even though you have a headset on, so that you have that more intense experience, so you can read empathy and so forth. But the fact is, having multiple people look at the same models, experience the same type of, let's say, a critical emergency situation without having to be in a same physical space, because sometimes getting everybody together can be a logistical nightmare, and plus the cost of that. So have you had an opportunity to, I mean, obviously you've got a system behind you. Have you already started working like that? In fact, I did hear when I emailed you, oh, I'll send you a link and you can join me. So have you been doing that, and how's that been working out for you?
So it's been a year in production, and I think one of the key things that was also noted at the OMSI event we were at was the collaboration between, let's say, me as a presenter and trainer to you as a developer, and getting that content just right, and making it as real as the subject matter expert needs it to be. So that's what's been going on the last year. And so to answer your question, in the last month we've been doing beta testing. I trained the campus security. I've shown people in New York the system, and I'm going to Taiwan next week to present at the command conference in a brand new simulation facility, and to try it across the ocean with the company. So we're rolling it out right now. The testing has gone really good. And actually, like I said, if anybody wants to shoot me their contact info, we can meet in VR and try it out. And I'm very impressed with the technology, the clarity of the audio. How they use this system is like this type of connection we're doing now. Ahead of time, you download the content so that there's less lag, and you might download a gigabyte of content, 360 videos, and all these other things, and it runs pretty smooth. I'm pretty impressed.
Now, what is the backbone of the system that you're working with?
You're going to ask technical questions, aren't you? The program is called Visible, and the technical, I believe it's based on. I'm not going to answer because I don't know those technical.
No, you don't need to do that. But what's the parent company?
WorldViz.
WorldViz, yeah. And that's one of the names that I identified in my summary paragraph for this episode. Now, I don't have any links today, and maybe I'll add them later on. But you can just go out to, I think it's www.worldviz.com,
Right.
and then you can find this page. And one of the key things that I think Rick is mentioning is that if you don't have a lot of developer skills, it really, if you can see it there, it's got a drag and drop type environment. Or
yeah, sorry, I was going to bring WorldViz up. But yeah,
that's
so,
okay.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, you go ahead and explain what your little interface there is and how I've been, and I'll bring up WorldViz on my end.
okay. And if you do go to the visible section, and that'll be this program. Like Michael said, basically it's very similar to a PowerPoint layout. You have your slides over on one side. As you build them out, you can build them from scratch or select pre-made scenes. All your assets that you use are over here, so you can, do any kind of additional animations, movement. You can hide things. There's a lot of features in each slide. And then your asset library is down here. So like, there's a chair. I can slide a chair in here, and everybody knows how to do this. You just move it around and can make it grabbable. And then it's in the scene. And when we download and connect, it's there. And you get to interact with it. And if I had to openly say what I wish the program had, I wish it had some boundaries that were not crossable. So right now you can click through everything and go right off the map. As far as training goes, I think that's a feature that to, I wouldn't say control the students, but to keep their attention. Once people get in here and start looking around, sometimes you lose them. But as far as from a teaching point of view, it's nice to be able to keep them in one area. That said, you can do that and not allow them to move. You can limit their controls. So I think it is the best one I've seen so far. And I know there's other online interaction programs, but as far as a training platform, I like this because I took the same program for active shooter, did a couple modifications, and I teach the National Stop the Bleed class, which was for tourniquets and how people can save each other in bad emergencies. And that program is going to be delivered through VR now. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it actually, the drag and drop features, and the fact is I think you can do that dynamically while you have multiple people in it is very interesting. All right, I'm going to fade over to the website, and then you should be able to see it too, Rick.
Yep.
So essentially, one of the things that I'm not aware of, I'm assuming there's a cost to this.
Correct.
Can you mention that for those that might be interested in this?
Sure, I'm not going to reveal what we pay per year because I'm not sure if we have a special deal being the first education delivery. But it's very common, and it's obviously your development fee is one thing, but if you're already into that and you are they use Vizard as their program to develop, and so I'm guessing anywhere from a few $1,000s, a couple $1,000s a year for multiple licenses to beyond that. A lot of businesses use this right now for global marketing and global management of companies. And so there's different price points depending on what you're using it for. But in my experience, when I contacted them, they'll give you demos, they'll let you do things, and so I've had nothing but good experiences with them as far as companies go. Yeah.
Well, and obviously, if you're able to make modifications and have what you would pay a developer, it probably gets offset by the cost of this. And even though there's a couple of real-time graphics engines from Unity and Unreal, the learning curve can be somewhat high. And then depending on how you use the application, if you're planning to sell it, there is what do you want to call it, a point that you reach where you have to start paying back Unreal, or they take a percentage. So that's something to keep in mind. They're not truly free, but from an educational perspective, they're powerful tools, but you have to know a lot about using them, where this is something that you can get up and running and get multiple people. And I'm assuming the multi-connect capability is built in and easy to work with, Rick?
I found it to be fairly easy. You can see on the right screen there that The controllers, I think it could be a little smoother, but they're very robust. You've got a lot of options, and so it is pretty good to use. Haven't used other systems. I think they're great. Obviously, I think the reason they like me being in the system is I'm not what you do. I'm not a professional modeler, and that's what everybody wants. They want this to be able to be used by anybody. And I know you guys do the work to do that, and they're providing a platform to where I can transfer some of the work you do. So user interface is fine, connection's good, and the platform to make the program on my side has been really easy. The GLTF formatting too has been crucial. Using sites like Sketchfab, and now I can actually import models a lot easier, not having that kind of background, and I can go to a packager, and it's been pretty good. I've been just using the free downloads. And,
so they got an immediate import capability from Trimble's SketchUp library. Is that correct?
Yep. Actually, so from anywhere. Yeah.
So one other thing that I noticed when I was there last, I think you had a HoloLens. Was that correct?
Yes. Actually, I don't have it anymore. It's at the nursing school, and that's actually kind of just another point as the medical community is really latching on to this. I kind of turned them onto it because I was a paramedic for most of my career, and I see the value on that side too. So they're having a good time with it. The HoloLens is being used with a company, Orbis Education, and they have a lot of medical models that way. But they're also using a VR program now called Induvo out of Illinois, and built by a doctor, and it's been going really well.
Well, that's very interesting. In fact, Rick, if you wouldn't mind sending me some links to those after the show, or when you sign off, and I'll make sure they're in the show notes, because that's another thing, and I'm glad that you mentioned VR being utilized in the medical community and the science community is extremely important now for its ability to model. And one of the things that I think it's Volvo is actually designing their vehicles and having engineers actually look at them while they're in the VR environment. So clearly we've got a powerful tool here. So let's go back to the AR component. Now you mentioned the HoloLens. Are you doing anything with the iPad or an iPhone using ARKit or ARCore?
The answer is no, and the other answer is I would like to, but I'm on my own right now in my current position, so I'm focusing on this right now. But I see a lot of applications for that, but I'm not doing anything at the moment.
What about Magic Leap? I mean, obviously that's how we started the show. Yeah. It's they're still an expensive unit, and some people say, I haven't actually experienced one for myself, that the visual quality is not that much more or better than the HoloLens. So why would you want to go to another platform? But maybe you've already seen or heard people talk about Magic Leap. So you have anything to add to that?
What I can add to that is, one, I do see the use of it, and if you compare it to the Lenovo game that came out last year, the Star Wars AR, I thought that experience was actually not bad for what the device was. I think both the HoloLens and the Magic Leap have price point issues for use in education right now. VR is a better entry because of the price, but I think there's some value to the VR AR technology that can't be beat. And recently I had a company, and I don't remember their name, talk about full body scans and how easy we were able to put those into the medical training. So you could have medical labs that have been never before done, with live avatars that are in your workspace. And so I think that just in that alone, there's going to be some magic leaps. But other than that, I'd have to turn to you and your followers on the technical abilities of each device. And I've been following Magic Leap a little bit. I think it's wonderful. I just don't think it's within my price range.
Yeah, and sadly, I'd have to say the same thing for myself, is that it's not in my price range as well. But we'll see. Obviously, it should all come down. I'm also a little disappointed in its viewing, or with field of view, And also the fact is that we don't have true occlusion yet. And the other thing that they had really promised, and obviously they weren't able to do it in this creator version, was the ability to have different focal lengths so that you could focus, and that was one of the points. So there are some other things. They obviously have a lot of money, so let's see what they do with it. So on that note, I think that's about it, Rick. I'm going to jump back to a screen that I saw, and you can see it there. This is if you want to find out more information, schedule a free tour and demo. And I think there's an email address. Will that go to you, Rick, the simulator at cuportland.edu?
Yeah, I read those, yes.
Okay, so I'll make sure. In fact, this is already in the, or will be in the show notes. So there'll be a link out to the Center for Emergency Solutions, and you can contact Rick. It's Huffman, right?
Correct.
And he can get you an opportunity to see a demo, and then if you have obviously some needs of your own, if you're in the emergency business, he can probably set you up with something. So again, thank you, Rick. I appreciate you. Obviously, it was a little short notice, but we were actually talking about some other things. As later on in the show, I'll be talking about the new Vive wireless unit, which I think is a good deal for $299. It seems to work flawlessly, at least in my small environment. I don't know with larger, if you units or areas, how well it'll work, or if you've got multiple Vive systems, but it says it will work up to 3, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And so if you were on the fence there, Rick, you might want to pick one up. Sure beats putting a backpack on.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it, and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, Michael. Have a good birthday weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so let's kind of move on. As mentioned, our theme today is working inside VR, and I just had Rick on, who runs the Concordia Emergency Safety Education System, and he obviously has been using several Vives, as well as has a full lab set up with councils to do emergency preparedness. And so he's got a fairly good setup out there at Concordia. But the other company, which I have behind me, is The Wild, which I'm going to be interviewing next week. And we're going to try and do something different. The Wild just announced this product, and I'll kind of run through it. And actually, I have a little video, which will do a better job than me in explaining what they do. So let's go ahead and run that first. Now, I have to say that I've already gotten a sneak peek of this, and I was very impressed. They were using an HTC Vive, and then I was talking with another guy, still in Oregon, but I think he was in Salem, Oregon. So, but I don't think the distance really matters, and I can see the potential of this, especially if you're in the AEC. Currently, they're looking at doing interior design and what do you call it, consumer design, and also, as you can see, the urban design. And you know, you can go in from a street level interior all the way up to bird's eye view and still work with it. And my experience, it was pretty fluid, and I really thought it was really cool. And so you can contact them. They'll set you up with a demo. But again, I'm going to be doing an interview with them, getting more experience with it next week. And then we'll actually be doing the interview in the space. They have some pretty cool little avatar figures. You can talk within it, and I'll be recording the whole show. Plus, I have a little inset video of me actually being in the VR space and then in my garage space. So it'll be kind of cool. We're also going to possibly test this at a hotel, which I could see a major use if you've got an engineer or an architect that's on the road. They could pop on. I'm going to be using a laptop and a, what will I be using? A Samsung Odyssey, and with my lap pack system, and be able to do the same thing. And I've been told that it will work with a Microsoft systems. So that would be kind of cool if you don't have an HTC Vive. So we'll be trying that as well. So again, that'll be next Friday. I will be probably doing the interview in offline, and then I will upload it later on Friday. So if you want to know more about the wild, check back next Friday for my interview there. All right, let's get into the other items for today. Somewhere. Oh, hang on there. My tablet fell asleep. Okay, so let's get into some updates from the past. I thought this really, I'm going to actually go right into the video. I thought this was really nice, and if you know, I've talked about Ninja before, and they've actually, I'll let them talk.
Hi, I'm Don Matthews, and I'm the Commercial Director at Ninja Theory, and I'm here with Tracy Bartlett from Recovery College East. Throughout the development of Hellblade, we work closely with Tracy and the group at the Recovery College to learn about their lived experience of psychosis to help us tell Senua's own story. Today, we're proud to be announcing the next phase of our collaboration, Senua Scholarship.
Ninja Theory will be funding the scholarship through our amazing Head to Toe charity, which is part of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough NHS Foundation Trust. This scholarship will provide an amazing opportunity every year for a student to train with us to become a tutor. We have a really good record actually at the Recovery College of many of our students actually becoming tutors. So they show people the opportunities of life beyond diagnosis, what can be possible. And for the one person who receives this scholarship every year, they will also be able to look at a new career perhaps, or return to an old career following a diagnosis or significant sort of mental health challenges. It's a hugely important moment for us because it continues our amazing collaboration with Ninja Theory and really does show the possibilities of life beyond diagnosis and allows us to continue as Senua did with that journey of discovery.
And it's a big thank you to all of our fans for your support. It's because of you that we're able to announce today's scholarship. If you'd like to find out more about how we went about telling Senua's own story of lived experience, you can check out Senua Psychosis, our documentary that's free to watch online now.
Now, as you know, if you've watched any of my previous episodes, I've been a really big fan of Ninja Theory. They've done some really good work, and obviously that Senua, not only did they have, I guess, a standard game, but they made a VR thing, and I did a little thing where I'm paddling behind her. But I have to agree, the experience was, I wouldn't say nerve-wracking, but it was enlightening. And they have a little YouTube video, I'm not going to show any of it, that's about 20 minutes that goes through the process they tried to utilize with technology in order to simulate that. And obviously they brought in people from the mental health community to try and pull it off. And I think they did an excellent job. And the fact is that they're taking some of that, the profits that they got from the game and putting it back into the mental health community. I just, hats off to them, and one of the reasons that I brought it up. And so again, there'll be a couple links. One of them will take you to that 20-minute, or you can look it up. Well worth it. In fact, later on, I'm going to do a little 3D audio where I had my wife, if you've seen my little examples of Breath of a Forest, I had her do something very similar. I had her walk around my Zoom H2N, which is a ambiX recorder, and walk around the microphone to create that voice that's around your head. And so we'll get a chance to look at that a little bit later and how to pull that off yourself. Clearly not the same kind of microphone that they were using. They were using a binaural type microphone with a high quality recorder. So it was probably thousands of dollars. Which gave you that effect of voices in your head. But you can pull that off too if you've got an H2N, and I'll show you how a little bit later. Okay, so let's get back into our next item. If you're an Unreal fan or developer, H2 or 421 preview is out. After reading the notes, many people didn't feel like there's a lot that this offers. It does offer something to me. As you know, I've created the active shooter awareness simulator, and I've created my own handgun that's very realistic using a Vive tracker. Sadly, Unreal up to this point could not use additional Vive tracker with inputs. It would crash the system. Supposedly that's fixed. I have already tested it. It doesn't crash the system, but then again, I can't fire the trigger or release the magazine or the other features that I had built into it. So clearly there's an issue that I need to figure out, but it's a positive because now you'll be able to use tracker type devices in Unreal without having to do a hack in order for it to work. So again, I will come back later. This just came out the other day. Other than that, it looks about the same, and there's a full list of what's available on this here. And then there are a lot of notes as well as what wasn't fixed and what was fixed that you can go through if obviously if you work in Unreal. But I won't spend any more time on that, and we'll move right into our next item. And I thought this was kind of neat. This 3dprint.com had released this little clip, but if you want to know more about metal sintering or metal additive sintering, this company, Ampower, out of Germany, has put together a small PDF. Just sign up for it. You know, you'll have to give them an email address, but it was well worth it. I've already reviewed it. So if you want to know the different techniques, and I wasn't aware that there are actually like half a dozen techniques. Okay, we should be back. Sorry about that. Lost a connection there briefly. So let me know if you don't see me, just kind of chat to me, but I think everything's back up and running. Okay, but you can go ahead and sign up for this. Read the article. It's pretty cool here. They talk about the different techniques, and they spend a little bit more time in this PDF. So if you want to know more about metal sintering and other techniques in order to create metal products, I think it's well worth it. And again, all they want is your email address. And I did get I think another email after this, so you'll have to deal with that, but I think it might be worth it if you want to know more about it. So go ahead and look into it. So on to another 3D technology, and I guess I can log in. And let's say accept cookies. So I had actually signed up before, and I think I'll log in because it'll give me a feature. There we go. But Radical uses AI, and it has a couple of apps. I think they have one for iOS and Android. Sadly, if you have footage already, you'll have to contact them because it has to match, I guess, the focal length of your camera. But if you want to go ahead and download their Android or iOS app, you can then use the app to upload. And what it will do is take the animation and convert it into a FBX model, as you can see there. Now, there are others. I think that's one of the best one. But again, just go ahead. Let's see. Let's try one of these others here. There we go. So this one actually turned out well, but there's a couple in there that didn't turn out well. But I guess you have the opportunity to see other people's work, and so these are some of the samples I guess they provided. And then it looks like you can go out to Sketchfab, but I'm not going to go out there right now, and see their models out on Sketchfab as well. And then I can rotate it so you can see it and zoom in on it. And then you can download it as either an actually right now just an FBX file. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, this is in, I can't remember what format, but a standard FBX format. Again, I haven't downloaded to see where it works, but currently it's in beta and it's free. And then I guess there's a certain cost depending how much time and how length of your animations are. But I thought that's kind of neat. And here it shows a 60 frames per second rate. And so they've been out for about 3 months now, and they've had a couple of links on some stuff. So let's see what else is out there. I guess we can explore. Yeah, so here are some of the others. Let's see what this one. So unknown. That's not bad. Okay. Obviously the knee was a little. One of the things I found, like using the Breckle system and a few other that use the Connect trackers, they have problems. And like here, you see that he's actually, let's see if we can stop and pause. Notice that his knee is completely down, yet the model doesn't seem to be falling with the same movement. So that would be a problem. But one thing I did notice, it seems to track limbs that it cannot see. So obviously this must be the AI component. That has been a problem with the Breckle system, plus basically any Connect system, unless you have multiple Connects or a much more expensive motion capture. But I think it does a pretty decent job. There is a limitation on the amount of time in the beta, and I don't know what the cost will be to do any more than that. And also don't know if there's a way to make your scans private, as I don't know if everybody here wanted to have their stuff up on the site. So very interesting. You can sign up for it. I think it's free at this time, and then go from there. All right, let's go into, what's our next item? Oh, this is kind of neat. So back into 3D fabrication, but 3D fabrication, and I've got a couple of videos that I'll show off from a house building perspective. What's interesting about this, but I'll let it go ahead and talk for me.
Let's go.
And here's another little video. What I thought was interesting is how they've actually put in the electrical boxes and are printing above it. Okay, so let's jump back to the screen and kind of go through the article. So one of the things that it mentions that it's actually kind of a mud type material. And what's the technique? They call it 0 kilometer structure, meaning they basically use the resources at the work site in order to build this. And then obviously here's some scaffolding, and they say that even that's flexible on how this works, but essentially it's just a kind of a single point extruder, as you can see there, the pipe there that creates the pattern. And I don't know if they mentioned how long it took to make one of these, but obviously it's a really neat idea. And yeah, here they talk about how it's created: soil, rice husk straw. Oh, here we go. And a price of $1,034 for the extra windows, doors, thermo insulation. Yeah, so I don't know if that's the full cost, but man, that's very, very reasonable. This is a company out of Italy, and it'd be very interesting to see how this thing holds up. It looks like they have to fill in, they use straw to fill in the honeycomb, or actually, I guess it's a different type pattern, but they fill it in with straw, it looks like. Huh. Very interesting. So there's more there. You can actually reach out to the company. It would be interesting to build something like that. You know, it's sad we do have a fairly big problem with homelessness, and if we could do something like this, I think that would be very cool. And be kind of cool to kind of live in something like that. Have little modules all connected together, kind of like a hamster house or something like that. Oh well, thought that was kind of neat. All right, let's move on to the next item. So we're in 3D in medicine now, and I thought this was kind of interesting. Some of the things that are being 3D fabrication is being used for. Here's a bionic eye. I thought this was kind of neat, an antibacterial tooth made out of a component that actually prevents bacteria from forming on it. A heart, which they say only works for 3,000 beats, and then I guess they had a number 30 to 45 minutes. Clearly, that's not something you'd want to put in your body. But the fact is that they were able to 3D fabricate it and actually make it work for a brief period of time. It's very interesting. Skin, we've talked about this before, but I've never seen. It looks like they have a 3D fabricated dispenser of, as you can see there, actually being used to create a layer of skin. The bionic ear I thought was kind of interesting, allowing, it uses a small coil into the cartilage that allows it to be connected into the neurons themselves and allows them to hear kind of truly a bionic ear of well above our normal hearing range. I don't know if I would want that. You'd hear stuff that you probably don't want to hear. And then elastic bone, people asked, I guess the question here is, why would you want that? Obviously great for children. And then this was kind of neat, creating a fabricated ovary, a synthetic ovary to reproduce mice. We're getting really, really close to some really weird stuff. Oh well. All right, moving on. Thought this was kind of neat as well. And this is, I guess, this combo architecture and 3D scanning. This is a company that I had went to a few talks on. It's called BIM, Building Information Modeling. And one of the cool things that I had looked into and heard somebody talk about is using BIM as well as what they call, what do they call it, 4D, which is using a time component that allows you to literally build models and then show the construction phases and the management phases so that you can see the link between one area and another, and if there's any conflicts, if things aren't going to, like resources aren't going to be available to finish something up. And it really helps minimize areas that could prevent the model from going up or the building. And it talks about that. It doesn't use the 4D principle, but the fact is this can all be done from a handheld device. And more importantly, it allows you to scan the existing space, either using this Leica scanner or a mobile 3D scanning app for an Android device. And I said, oh, that would be kind of interesting. Sadly, it is only with the, what is it, the Asus device with the Tango camera in it, so that you can actually scan this and then you can do model comparisons, or as they call it, BIM deviations, to ensure spacing and specifications are reached. And then obviously by having it in your hand, you can basically keep that information with you. The apps are available, again, if you've got one of the Asus Tango devices. I can't remember what the model number is, but it does tell you right here. Let's see where it tells you. But essentially, you use it to scan. If you go out to Google, it says this app is incompatible with your device. So it has to be, I want to find the actual Asus number, but there's only one Asus device. Now, what's interesting, if it's only the Asus mobile phone, it will not probably work with any of the previous Tango tablet or something like that. So kind of neat. Yeah, in fact, one of my friends is a inspector, and he's told me a couple of nightmares, like in a hospital, they put in an elevator shaft, but the elevator shaft was like off a foot. So between the elevator shaft and the front of the doors. So literally you could step down and fall into the gap between them if they had not caught it. Clearly there was some cost involved in order to build it properly, and obviously something like this would help clear that up. Okay, on to the VAMR corner, and I've only got one item here because I have a couple of items to talk about in the tech closet. But this just came out. I saw it earlier in the week. It's Instant 360 1X. I've got the previous one, so I like the Instant 361. It's a nice camera, but it's only a 4K camera. Now this one is up to a 6K or 5.7. More importantly, it supports HDR, and this would make it very interesting if you're a developer and you want to capture high-resolution static images to be used for global illumination. I know that I was able to take from my one, once I converted it into an EXR file, I was able to drag and drop it immediately into Unreal and use it as an equirectangular for a cube map scene for one of my, I guess it was Breath of a Forest. So I was thinking, and actually I think I wrote them, wouldn't it be great to have HDR? I don't think they included it in the one, but it does look like it's available in the 1X. The cool thing, at least for me, I don't know if you can order it. I don't know how soon it would come to you, but it's only $3.99. So it's not stereo, so you've only got a single camera, but it's 360, almost 6K for video, and then like what it was, 18 meg static shots. So pretty nice. I have to figure out all this money to spend and not making enough to spend it on. Oh well. So if you're interested in something like that, look into it. You know, today is my birthday. Oh no. No, my wife bought me a globe. And even though I had mentioned I wanted a globe, I didn't want a globe that bad. But it's kind of cool. It's one of the older kind of globes that, I don't know, like the 16th century, 15th century. So it's kind of neat. So there you go. You can obviously spend more time salivating over that if that's something you want. I know that I want it. There's a couple of cameras, but this one's kind of reasonably priced. And then this one you can order now. You may actually get it now. I normally wait till it hits Amazon, then I can be assured that it'll be there. And then the other camera from Views, very similar to this, $100 more, but you can split the cameras out to do stereo 180. It's kind of neat, but you pre-order that, and pre-order from Views in the past has not been timely. In fact, I think pre-orders before took 6 to a year before you actually got it. So if this one's out already, it might be very interesting to get if you don't need 3D or stereo camera capability. All right, so on to the tech closet. So if you are waiting for this, I can say $2.99 for the bi-wireless adapter is worth it. I have a little video that I can show. This is what I did earlier today. Sadly, I didn't mirror sound, so there won't be any sound with it. But here I'm in my space down in the garage, which is about a 10 by, what is it, 20, I think. It's a fairly large space, and there I'm walking around. I did think that I may have had problems with it blacking out, but I think it was more because I was moving around too quickly that I was causing the trackers not to track. And then this is kind of neat. If you haven't seen it, the Nesferetti. It's free, and here in Portland at the OMSI, they're running a King Tut exhibit, and I had volunteered to set up an HTC Vive, and after trying this, it's pretty cool. I don't know if you have, it's free, you can get it on Steam, and if you've never visited the tomb, clearly this is the best way to do so. And I hope they do this with other things that are they're either shutting down because they're eroding or deteriorating. But this would give you the ability to venture down there, especially if you're disabled, and be able to go down there and just kind of teleport. And so here I am, and I really felt like I was in the tomb. It was a really good experience. And the fact is I had no wires, and it's a little heavier. I mean, you immediately forget about it. But the fact is I was walking around with my HTC Vive. I almost forgot that I was in a VR space. Again, this is a very realistic. It was done with photogrammetry, so the quality is exceptional. And if you've got a 1070 or above, make sure that you have it at its highest quality. And then you can click on certain things. I think I do that after playing around in here, but I think I try to get really close to it. It looks like they have different levels, and one of them is that they use normal mapping, so these things actually seem somewhat embossed. So they have some 3D, as you can see there. And then they have dust in the air, so it really gives it a very immersive 3D immersive experience. They've got wind, and I think I had a window open, so I actually felt like there's a breeze coming through me to match the wind. So I felt very much like I was in the space. So I'm going to let this play a little bit longer. The teleport so that you can see the walls kind of highlight. There we go. So they highlight, and then you get a little indicator to click the trigger on it, and then a voice starts talking to tell you about what you see there. But man, the quality is just exceptional. Some of the things that are coming out, I mean, if you're just in the games, you're really missing some things. Some of these things are just exceptional, and if you don't have an opportunity to head to the pyramids, this might be clearly the next best option. In fact, I felt like I'm there already. So, well, at least that's my opinion. So, again, I'm using the wireless system with this, and I highly rate it. In fact, let me jump to my other camera here and bring it out so you can see my setup. So I have the original HTC Vive, and essentially it just goes on the strap. There we go, like that. And it comes with a custom cable. So you just replace the cable that you normally have, plug this into the little wireless unit. And it's, like I said, it's only a couple of ounces. It's very lightweight, plasticky, but that doesn't matter here. And then it has these antennas, but they don't get in the way. There's very little weight. And the only thing that you have to connect to it is a USB cable. And we're going to try this today to see if you can use other 5-volt sources. But you plug it in like that. And then you have this little battery system here with a power button. You turn it on. Plus, if you don't have it plugged in, it acts as a what do you want to call it? A power indicator. It's got 4 LEDs. I ran it for about an hour and a half and basically depleted half the battery. So I think it's 3 hours is probably about right. And then that's essentially it. Yeah, as you can see there, let me bring it back into view. You'll see a blinking light above their Vive pyramid or triangle there. That will go solid once you launch the little Vive app. It's like a little Vive wireless. You just download their setup. I had no problem with it. In fact, I don't even think I had to restart. So you get a little thing that you have to start. I would suggest starting that first and then starting your Steam VR after that. And then it just looks like a standard headset to the Steam VR system. It's really easy. The battery, it has a little heft to it, about that of a phone. So if you clipped your smartphone to your belt, it feels about the same. Like I said, it's like a 10,000 milliampere battery, about 3 hours. But they don't have any replacements for this. So if you wanted additional batteries, they don't seem to offer it yet. And I don't know what they would cost. So we're going to try something now. We're going to unplug this. And then I've got this Anchor 5-volt battery. So I'm going to put this battery. So I'm going to turn this on, make sure I'm in the camera. And then we're going to plug it in. So I'm either going to blow up my system, which I doubt, but I should be able to plug it in. There we go. Well, I'm not seeing anything. It's not lighting up. That's interesting. So as you can see there, there's no light coming on and the Anchor battery eventually turns off. So that's very interesting. So I'm going to plug it back into the battery. Okay, so very interesting. So it appears that the battery that comes with it seems to be the only battery that works with it. And so that's a little disappointing. So I'm wondering if that's a proprietary cable. They don't indicate that it is. So I'll have to actually measure the voltages out and see what they're actually running through this and see if it's a 12-volt supply. It could well be charged by a standard 5-volt, let's say USB-C connector here. Takes about 2 to 3 hours to charge. So I hope they come out with additional batteries very soon. Otherwise, it's going to require you a few hours to have this charged. But I normally don't use my system for more than an hour, 2 hours at most. But if you're playing a game, that could be a problem. Sadly, it does not seem to work with a standard 5-volt USB battery. And so that means there must be something unique in the way they have this set up. The fact is they're using a USB-C USB cable, which I think only has 5 pins on it, 5 fingers. No, actually 4 fingers. I'm going to have to look at it and see what they're actually supplying for power. So I'll have to get back next week and identify exactly what they're doing there. Clearly it did not work with a standard 5-volt power supply. So that was a little disappointing. But other than that, the whole system worked really well and very pleased with it. I had no glitching at all. Like I said, I had more problems staying in line with the 2 base stations than the actual tracker. I had no problems with the video. Didn't seem to have any delay with it. No, I just felt like I was tethered without a tether. So again, if you have small spaces, it may not be worth the $300. But if you've got a large 10 by 10 space or more, not having a cable hooked up is really advantageous. And so I think it's well worth its $300. And we'll see. They need to have extra batteries so that you can have one charging while you're working with it. Otherwise, that's going to be a problem. And clearly you can't use anything except their batteries. Or at least that's what I seem to have found now. I will have to look at the voltages and see if there's something else going on there that limits or prevents you from using something else. But I will look at that at another time. All right, so finally the last thing for today, and let me jump down to that screen, is I guess section 4 of 6. But one of the things that in looking at that little demo video from Ninja Theory is how they created the voices where if you've ever played the game, they kind of circle your head, especially if you've got speakers on it. It's kind of an eerie feeling. So I thought, well, that would be pretty easy. After seeing their little demonstration video, they had like I said, a binaural what do you want to call it, mic system that with little ears with mic elements in it. And I've got something like that you can actually put in your own ears. But this is all self-contained. I think it's a multi-$1,000 setup. But they had you could watch them. They were actually talking and saying things and walking around these, I wouldn't say it's a dummy, these ears while they were recording it. So I thought I could do the same thing with the H2N from Zoom, and sure enough, I did it. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the Unreal. And one of the things I had problems with is making sure Unreal was exporting audio out of the right channel. And hopefully it stuck when I made the changes. But if you wondered yourself how to change your audio channel while you're in Unreal, it's pretty easy. Once I figured it out, go to your build package settings, go to audio, and then up here, where's it at? Wrong thing, sorry. Go to Windows, if you're using a Windows system. Go down to audio, and then audio device, change it to whatever your export or output device is. I had it set up for the Realtek audio, and kept turning it on, shutting it down, going into the windows, and none of it would work. So finally I figured it out. So you should be able to hear some sound. So let's see if that's the case. I'll turn up my monitor levels so I can hear it myself. Okay, here we go.
Feel free to relax, settle in, and notice your breath.
So if you listen to the voice, you may get some echo on this.
As you notice around you, you might feel your breath slowing.
Now, of course, you're going to have to put on headphones in order to hear it.
It's so peaceful here, so tranquil and soothing. Notice and sense the air and sense the warmth on your skin, solid ground under your feet, as you appreciate the many colors and textures of the rocks on the ground.
Well, again, that'll give you some idea. And let me turn down my monitor level. That'll give you some idea. You probably can't hear it if you're basically listening to this out of one speaker. But if you got headphones on, you do get the feeling that she's walking around you. So it's kind of a cool effect. But one thing that I found in using ambiX sounds is one, if you were watching last week's episode, I ran into a snag because I was using a 24-bit audio sample or ambiX sample, and I tried to import it into Unreal, and it didn't like it. It only likes 16-bit, and I think you can use either 42 or, let's see, 42, 48, yeah, or 40 kHz sample rate, but for whatever reason, it didn't like using 24-bit. And that's a problem because I'm going to show you that if you work with the, remember we've talked about using Reaper's spatial workstation plugin, not plugin, but template. When I tried to export this out as an 8-channel and then use the Facebook encoder, and once you set it to by format or B format first order ambiX, which would be the appropriate ambiX that's supported in Unreal and Unity, and then you bring in your 8-channel audio from Reaper, exports it, but sadly it exports it as a 24-bit, so I had to then go into Audition, bring in the channels, and then convert it by going to Convert Sample Type, 48 kHz, I just left it the same, but more importantly, your bit depth has to be 16. Hit OK, and I've already done it, and then you have to make sure that you export it, and make sure that you read that it still has 4 channels, otherwise it won't work. And that's about it. And then you can import it directly into Unreal through the import or drag and drop it, and then it will show up as a 4-channel ambiX sound. And then what I did, and this is the important thing, unlike using monophonic channels that you can place into your environment and then turn on binaural functionality So that way, if you walk up to them or if you turn your head, the localized sound from that particular object, let's say a bird or an animal, or even if it's moving, will be realistic as you move your head. But with ambiX, it's more for ambient sound. So if you're capturing it with the H2N, you're literally capturing everything around you. So you don't really want to place that somewhere in your environment unless its span is like in the center of it and it's global. But what I did is I attached to my camera. Now, of course, if you're moving around, you may not want your ambient sound to move with you. But in the case of the voice, I wanted it to. So here's my motion control pawn. So then I just added an audio channel. And so let's see which one. That's the backyard one, which I'm going to bring up in a moment. But here is her voice. And then you just need to ensure that whatever level, oops, sorry, wrong one. Here we go. So I have it at 0.1 volume multiplier. And there's something else that I want to address in a second. And then you want to go down here, and I changed it to logarithmic, geez, can't even talk, logarithmic, and then allow spatialization and then override attenuation so that you can come down here and choose binaural. So if you don't remember what I did last week, you also want to make sure that you add the plugin for audio called Resonance Audio, and I found that to be not only the easiest to work with, this is the Google Resonance, but seems to be, from a lot of people that I've been listening or talking to, one of the more realistic systems to work with. So this you would enable, and then obviously there's Steam Audio. I've tried that before, but you literally have to bake in certain functions into it, and if that file is missing, then your system will error. So I wasn't too hip on that. So I just disabled that. And I guess there are some features now available in Unreal itself that you can enable that provide 3D audio as well. And then obviously there's the Oculus plugin. So I'm using the Resonance Audio. Make sure that you have whatever plugin set up. Then make sure that you go back into your package settings. Go all the way to the bottom and find whatever you had selected. Here's my Resonance Audio. And then I have it at binaural high quality. I don't have any global reverb settings, even though I guess I could set one. Nope, I don't have any. So I just left it off, and basically there wouldn't be much reverb out in the open area like this anyways. And then once that's done, you're pretty much good to go. One more thing is that you would go up to the, get out of that, your platform, go to Windows, go down to the bottom, and then make sure that you select the spatialization plugin that you're working with, which I have done already. And I just left the defaults, but basically you would identify what you would need as far as channels and so forth. And that's about it. And the results are somewhat interesting. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch out my audio channels. So one thing that I noticed, unlike visible object, you can't just go down and select render in game off because it won't make any difference. Either delete it, or what I did was just go to the volume multiplier and just turn it to 0, which effectively shuts it off. But it's still probably taking up cycles, so you may want to just, I don't know of how you would delete it, so you may have to just remove it. And then I guess it was already on. Let's make sure. Okay. So you may have already heard it. So now we're going to go back. Now this is the one I did last week in my backyard, and it has crickets. So you should be able to hear the crickets when we play it now. I'm going to go ahead and put on the VR. Now, of course, it doesn't make much sense to have crickets in the middle of the day, but it seems pretty realistic to me. And again, because I've attached it to my camera, moving my head really isn't going to reorientate the sound field. And if you listen closely, you'll hear me kind of walking around in the leaves. Okay, well, there you go. Let me go ahead and turn my level back down. So I apologize if you're hearing some reverb, but I know I am. So, okay, so there you go. Obviously, it's not a very sophisticated setup. I think the sounds are fairly realistic, and at the cost of less than $200 for the Zoom H2n, you can pretty much drag and drop the ambisonic sounds directly into it. The problem I've had with it, though, since there's no editing capability in the actual unit, when you hit the record button to record as well as shut it down, that does show up, or show up. It does get recorded, so you will get like a clunk or something in your recording, so you may have to edit it. I did have problems using Oddity. Even though it'll bring in the 4 channels, it does not have the ability to export 4 channels. Adobe Audition does, as well as Reaper. So those 2 you can work with. I kind of like Audition because I've used it a lot for the podcast. But Reaper not only will allow you to add more channels and use the Facebook tools, but then you can export it. Sad thing is, the encoder for Facebook only provides 24-bit, which means Unreal can't use it. And I ran into that earlier today, which means I had to go back to Audition and change it back to 16 bits. So it was kind of a pain. So there are probably other tools out there. Adobe Audition is what I use because I have a subscription to the Adobe tools, but it's up to you. The important thing is Unreal can either use 40 kHz or 42 kHz or 48, as well as 16 bits depth, but it will not use 24. And I don't know if it uses 32-bit depth either, so it would be safe just to ensure that you use 16-bit depth for your ambiX sound. And as long as it's encoded as 4 channels, just drag and drop, and it seemed to work pretty good. So there you go. It's a quick way. I'm going to do the same thing in Unity, but if you remember last week, Unity seemed to be a little more liberal as far as the formats. It works with both the 16-bit as well as the 24-bit. So Unity seems to be a little bit more ahead in that respect. But once you drop them in, they do seem to work pretty well, and can add some really nice ambient sound to your environments. I'm going to play with it a little more. I don't know if you noticed when she was walking around. I did that in my living room, so I was also picking up the reverb and the acoustics of the room, so it wasn't a dead room. So if you plan to use these things, you may want to use some foam or a very dead room with carpeting in order to do something like that. Otherwise, it shows up, again, it's not visible. You can hear the actual environment that you were recording. So what I've done in the past is a closet, but if you're wanting to walk around the room, that's obviously not very good. I do have a lot of that foam with the little pyramids on it that I had a larger room set up. I don't have that anymore, but you may want to look at that, or put carpeting on the walls or blankets and carpeting on the floor to help. But that helps deaden the room and kind of takes away a little bit of that reverb that if you're working outdoors you don't want, and also you don't want to add that to whatever artificial reverberation or synthesized reverberation you have in your 3D scene. So pretty much you don't want the external audio cues that if you are trying to put something in that's going to be put into another environment. The reason why I'm kind of slow right now on this is that I'm also thinking of doing the same thing and doing the whole thing out in the forest. So having my wife talk around and say the lines for the breath of a forest while we're out on the forest, so it's extremely realistic. So I may do that over the next week or two, and then I'll report back on how well that worked out. So there you go. If you want an inexpensive way to bring in ambiX audio, just go out and buy one of those Zoom H2Ns. Great little device, and it can not only be used for that, but a standard mic for podcasts and other things. It's very versatile and very easy to work with in Unreal and Unity now to bring those audio tracks in and have the ambient sound that you're looking for. Oh well. That's it for today. I'm kind of rambling, and I think it's time for me to sign off. And on that note, I guess I'll see you in about a couple of weeks. But don't forget, next week, I'm going to have upload an interview with the wild. Hopefully, we'll be able to do it within the VR environment and interact with the tools. So if you're an architect or a planner, and looking for some tools that you can work with people in other offices or even around the world, I think they've got a clear winner, and we'll have more on that next Friday. So on that night, enjoy your weekend, and I will see you next week, I guess. Bye.